on the phone are you the managing editor?
Yeah, you said director on your website there. I'm a really bossy editor. How's that? We can compromise.
Okay. I screwed up. Sorry. Managing editor of crooksandliars.com, among the 3 other jobs you seem to have.
I do.
Tina Dupuy.
I do. I'm the 99%.
You're working overtime.
All the time.
So last night, I woke up in the middle of the night because I was sick. I was coughing. And whenever I'm in that situation, I run to my computer and look on Twitter to see what's going on. And sure enough, they were evicting the Occupy LA. The cops were. And I saw you were in the thick of it. So tell us what happened.
Well, I got a text from my source at the LA Times who said, "Yeah, you should probably get down here." And I showed up, and there were probably 3 times as many media trucks as I've seen there before, and some of the streets had started to get blocked off, and I was able to get in. And there were probably about, I estimated, 1,500 protesters maybe in the park, and near the street. And around midnight, we kind of got the word that they were coming in, quote unquote. And about 12:30, there were 1,400 members of the Los Angeles Police Department, all in helmets, that kind of just showed up. A lot of people by that time fled, so there were basically one protester per, or one cop per protester at that point. And
That's the kind of ratio that any parent of a school child would love.
Right, exactly. Isn't that amazing? I had something similar, but they were incredibly intimidating force that kind of showed out. There were, of course, hazmat suits because that was the big line. That Viragosa thought that everyone was stinky and dirty, and they had successfully, the protesters, brought the homeless problem to City Hall, the steps of City Hall, instead of 2 blocks away where it's been for the past few decades. Los Angeles has the largest permanent homeless encampment in the world, and it's 2 blocks away from City Hall, and it's been there forever. It's pretty much no man's land, and they've been camping on the sidewalks there for as long as anyone can remember. The police department, or the police station in Skid Row, doesn't have any windows. Not bars on the windows, but there's just no windows. It's like a bomb shelter, and there's all this kind of lore that that's the place. And if you want to park in the red zone, you can do that in Skid Row because there's no tow truck that would go down there. Anyway, so the homeless people, it's in this kind of cruel irony of the protesters bringing out wealth and equality and also attracting homelessness at the same time, and that being the reason why the mayor would no longer take the protest. It is kind of, it's cruel. But anyway.
Yeah, so, I want to talk about that for a second, though, because, it was interesting. I saw, earlier in the day, I saw reports that the LAPD was was beginning to stage at Dodger Stadium.
Yeah.
And then I saw some notion, I think it was a CBS story, just as they were beginning to move in on the occupation, saying that the police were worried about feces being thrown at them. Mm-hmm. It really is. That was really the angle that they've used, that every city seems to have used, right? It was just sort of health and safety type of situation. When, of course, there's absolutely zero evidence that there's been any health or safety issues that didn't exist prior to the occupations in all these cities.
Right. Well, the health inspectors were actually at Occupy LA every day. I mean, that was what the occupiers told me, that they were there from the first week. It was a 61-day occupation, and they were there every day, and every day they would come in, and the health inspectors would have suggestions or not, and the occupiers would adhere to that because they really wanted to stay in that camp. So yeah, no, that's the line, and the local press, or at least the local news, the TV broadcasters really fed into that, where they, I'm going to post a video later of one of our local yokels going around and going, oh my God, look at all the trash. Which is, I mean, who goes to a Dodger game and then it goes to the Dodger, instead of covering the game, they go and cover, the Dodger Stadium, how untidy all the fans are.
Right.
I mean, it's just a ridiculous line. But you're absolutely right. It's like, oh, it's filthy. Oh, it's filthy. And it's like, and the LAPD has no evidence, and really they had a 6-hour standoff on when they first closed the park on Sunday night, Monday morning. There were about 2,000 people that just kind of chanted and hung out for 6 hours until they had to the cops had to reopen the street for morning commute traffic. And the only instances of violence were, some kids who showed up and threw bottles at police, and the protesters pushed them out and gave them over to police. And because Los Angeles specifically have said that they are militantly nonviolent. So there were, they have all decided collectively and by group consensus that they are not going to be violent whatsoever, and anybody who perpetrates violence will be given over to police because they do not represent the group. So the police had 6 hours of watching these kids, watching these protesters just not, chant and be lively and express themselves, but not in any way be violent. And so, of course, the local yokels are now saying, well, they're kind of nonviolent, but they did get arrested. And it's like,
right.
Okay, you really do not understand what nonviolent struggle means, because that's kind of the point.
Now, of these local yokels, how many of them ended up in the press pool to get the good coverage of this?
You got it, all of them. Yeah, or that was who was there. Yeah.
Wow, I'm sure that's
they tried to kick me out of the press pin.
Wait, were you? Were you in there?
Well, no, I wasn't in the press pool. I was in the park until midnight. I got a text saying that you need to get out of the park by midnight. So I did that, and I went over to the press pin. I had my press credentials because I'm in 85 newspapers a week. Because the LAPD doesn't think a blog is a real publication yet.
Right.
It's apparently 2003 at the LAPD. If I'm being kind, anyway. So but I'm a legitimate journalist. I even write for magazines and stuff. Anyway, I had my badge on, my credentials on my chest, and he said, and this cop was kicking some protesters out of the press pen, and he said, where are your credentials? And I showed him, and he said, those aren't the right credentials. I said, yes, they are. And he said, no, those aren't our credentials. And I said, I'm not going to have your credentials because I don't cover crime, I cover politics. And he said, you can't be here without the right credentials. I said, yes, I can. I'm a legitimate journalist, and there's also the First Amendment. And he said, look, that's not my problem. I said, yes, it is, and I have a right to be here. And then he got distracted and walked away. But I was, it was ridiculous. I mean, really, you're going to check my I was like, do you want to? I can show you my byline if that helps.
My understanding is
they wanted just their people.
Did you hear this? My understanding is that the people in the press pool were not allowed to tweet during the raid.
I did not hear that. What I heard about that was that they had about 12 people who were in the press pool who would be given protective clothing. And a police escort in order to go into the park and film and cover and do whatever.
Protective clothing?
Protective clothing, not hazmat, because there were people there. It was like I'm sure it was an effective visual to kind of make them look like disgusting hippies to have the hazmat suits. But they were given, I guess I'm assuming gas masks or vests or whatever. That was
or just something to make it look like there's a reason why we should be.
Right,
we're going to justify why we
show
up looking like the military, and it's just basically a way of taking those dupes who go into the pool and make them feel like you're going into a dangerous situation, as opposed to just a bunch of people who are incredibly peaceful, sitting down and exhausted.
Right. people who've been
Unbelievable.
sleeping in a park and people who are, I mean, this is the whole concept of nonviolent struggle is to break arbitrary rules, and then when the authority doesn't let you or lets you break arbitrary rules without enforcing their rules, which means that their rules mean nothing and you win, or they enforce their arbitrary rules and they look like, douches for, enforcing arbitrary rules. Either way, nonviolence wins the PR war. So the only other way to kind of discredit these people is to make them look like they're filthy.
Right. It's going to be interesting to see what happens as many of the physical occupations end, at least in the short run, and the movement becomes more about the actions it takes, what the criticism is going to be, what the narrative is going to be. Because at this point, the only thing that they've been able to be attacked upon is this idea that there's a hygiene problem or
Right.
that there's a safety problem. It's going to be interesting to see what happens when this movement starts to get more involved in foreclosures, starts to get more involved in labor strikes. It's going to be interesting to see what the criticism is.
Well, that's what I've heard from the occupiers who have lost their camp, that they're actually, they're relieved that they can spend less time in what they're calling social services, like feeding people and everybody, within who comes to the park, and more on social action. And so losing the encampment is actually much more liberating in that way, that they can spend their time focusing not on the day-to-day struggle as to, whether or not there's enough hand sanitizer in the camp, or personal disputing kind of issues, and more onto, like you said, foreclosures or actions or policy issues or demands or whatever else they're going. Because the energy is still there, and there's still people, wanting to get involved and wanting to give their time for this movement. But the camping was really a very specific symbol, and it was a very specific kind of person who wanted to spend time in a park, who could spend time in a park and sleep there. I'm like, I've been covering these things, and porta potties completely freak me out. I'm surprised, but that's another issue for another time.
Yeah, we're going to need a different interview for that. One more thing I wanted to just bounce off you was that I've seen that an LAPD commander, that they were taking swabs of people, I guess presumably in their mouths, with those long Q-tips, and people were assuming they were taking them for DNA testing. But supposedly they were testing them for staph infection. Have you heard anything about that?
Wow, no, I haven't. But again, the visual of them being infected and having these disgusting, cooties, I believe that was on Monday night, or Monday morning. That's what everyone there was somebody on the news who just kind of blurted out that, they're definitely working with some kind of PR people, because they've been really able to, the LAPD, because they've been pretty good about this by LAPD standards.
Right.
And so that sounds to me, I'm not familiar. Again, I did not hear that report, but I did see them in hazmat suits show up, and that's been in the press pool who are, in my opinion, complicit with this kind of with this narrative, is that they are disgusting and horrible, filthy people who are, clearly have all sorts of diseases that they're going to spread to anybody who goes to City Hall. The funny thing now is that what used to be an open park for everybody is now gated in. They've erected a fence all around City Hall, and so it's like they've said, the mayor has said that he was going to open it during certain hours a day for free speech. Which, when a government official says, where you can have free speech, it's never good. It's always a bad sign. But now there's this big fence over it, so City Hall now looks like it really does belong in an Escape from LA movie.
Well, hopefully they'll rename the square Cootie Free Square.
Right, sanitized City Hall.
Tina,
of all the blemishes that we could possibly have in the city.
Tina Dupuy, thanks for joining us.